He was the king of the city, and she was his truculent, beautiful wife. At the biggest charity gala of the year, in front of everyone who mattered, Marcus Vance didn't just break her heart, he shattered her life. He called her dead weight, publicly replacing her with a younger, more suitable woman. He had security escort her out, penniless and humiliated. But Marcus made one fatal mistake. He thought he was evicting a stray. He never realized he had just declared war on a dynasty. He turned Paul only when her family, the real power, arrived unannounced. The penthouse on Park Avenue was less a home and more a museum of Marcus Vance's success. It was all glass, brushed steel, and cold white marble cantilevered 70 floors above New York City. And like any prized exhibit, Elara Vance was kept in perfect, silent condition. Elara was his masterpiece, or so he often told his friends. He'd discovered her, he'd say, working as a simple art gallery assistant in Soho. He'd plucked her from obscurity, polished her, and given her his name. In return, she was expected to be beautiful, silent, and grateful. This evening was the dress rehearsal for the main event, the annual Vance Foundation Gala. It was Marcus's self-coronation, a night where the city's elite would gather to write 7-figure checks and kiss the ring of its newest corporate king. The blue Elara, not the green, Marcus said, not looking up from his phone. He was already in his custom Tom Ford tuxedo. Elara stood in the enormous walk-in closet, the emerald green silk dress pooled at her feet. I thought the green brought out, it makes you look sallow. The blue, the one I chose. His thumb swiped dismissively. And the Lockwood diamonds, not your grandmother's pearls. They look quaint. Quaint. The pearls were the only thing she had left of her mother's mother. A woman who had run a European shipping empire with more steel in her velvet glove than Marcus possessed in his entire body. But Marcus didn't know that. He thought Elara Hayes, the name she'd been using when they met, was just some girl from a decent but unremarkable family in New England. She had never corrected him. She had wanted to be loved for herself, not for her name, her real name. The name she had run away from, 8 years ago, desperate for a normal life, was Devereaux. "Of course, Marcus," she murmured, her voice the practiced, soft tone he preferred. She slipped on the sapphire blue gown. It was exquisite, but it felt like a uniform. Downstairs, the pre-gala fundraiser was already underway. Marcus, CEO of Vance Industries, a rapidly expanding but deeply over-leveraged real estate firm, was holding court. He loved the sound of his own voice, especially when it was echoed by fawning investors and nervous politicians. Elara drifted through the crowd, a perfect smiling ghost. She passed Senator Keating, who gave her a polite empty nod, and a few wives of board members who offered air kisses that smelled of Chanel No. 5 and rivalry. Then she saw her, Chloe Sterling. Chloe was the Vance Foundation's new Director of Strategic Partnerships. She was barely 26, with a law degree from Yale and a predatory ambition that Elara recognized instantly. She was also, Elara knew, with a cold, sinking certainty, sleeping with her husband. She'd seen the late-night strategy texts, the lingering touches in the hallway, the way Marcus looked at her, not like an exhibit, but like a new acquisition he couldn't wait to unwrap. Chloe was in a blood-red dress, her hand on Marcus's arm, laughing a little too loudly. Marcus caught Elara's eye from across the room. There was no apology in his gaze, no shame. There was only impatience. "Elara, darling," he boomed, gesturing her over. The room quieted. Chloe was just telling me about the new projections for the children's wing. Brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. Chloe smiled, a flash of perfect white teeth. Oh, Elara, you look lovely. Blue is so obedient on you. Marcus, we really must finalize the seating charts for tomorrow. She'd used Elara's presence not to retreat, but to stake her claim. She was already the acting hostess. Elara felt the familiar chill. She had spent 5 years being the perfect, unassuming wife, hiding her intellect, her background, and her strength, all in the name of a love she'd thought was real. She had sacrificed her dynasty for this man. And as she stood there, watching him look at Chloe Sterling, she realized her sacrifice hadn't just been in vain. It had been a joke. "If you'll excuse me," Elara said, her voice a whisper. "I need to check on the catering for tomorrow." Marcus waved her away, already turning back to Chloe. Yes, you handle that." Elara walked away. Her back straight, her hands clenched so tightly her nails dug into her palms. She didn't go to the kitchen. She went to her small hidden art studio at the back of the penthouse, the one room Marcus found cluttered and never entered. She closed the door, leaned against it, and let out a breath she felt she'd been holding for 5 years. On her easel was a half-finished painting, a chaotic, brilliant storm of dark blues and violent slashes of white. It was the only place she was allowed to be herself. She looked at the phone on her desk. One number was programmed into it, a number she had sworn never to call. Matriarch. Her finger hovered over the contact. Not yet. Not until the humiliation was complete. And she had a terrible, sickening feeling that tomorrow, at the gala, Marcus was planning to give her exactly that. The grand ballroom of the Pierre Hotel was a sea of glittering diamonds and desperate ambition. This was the night, the 10th annual Vance Foundation Gala. Marcus had spent a rumored $3 million on the event, transforming the space into a modern Versailles, complete with ice sculptures and flowing champagne fountains. Elara stood by his side at the entrance, her smile as practiced and brittle as the spun sugar on the croquembouche. She wore the blue dress. She wore the Lockwood diamonds. She was the perfect, silent accessory. "Marcus, wonderful!" a donor bellowed, slapping Marcus on the back. "Senator, so glad you could make it. Marcus, you've outdone yourself. Only the best you know that." Marcus was electric feeding on the adoration. He barely looked at Elara, except to occasionally grip her arm in a gesture that looked like affection to the cameras, but felt like a warning to her. Chloe Sterling was already inside, working the room like a seasoned politician. She had saved a seat for herself at the head table right next to Marcus. Elara's seat, she noted with a cold prickle, was on the other side next to a doddering half-deaf board member. The hierarchy was clear. The transition was already in progress. "Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The presentation is about to begin." The lights dimmed. A slickly produced video played showing Marcus Vance cutting ribbons, shaking hands and staring thoughtfully at blueprints. It painted him as a visionary, a philanthropist, a man single-handedly rebuilding the city. Elara watched, her stomach twisting. The man on the screen was a stranger. The man she'd married, or thought she'd married, was a quiet, driven man who'd told her he hated the stuffy world of his parents. It had all been a lie. He hadn't hated it. He'd just been on the outside, desperate to get in. And she, Elara Devereaux, had been his key. Except he'd never even known which lock she opened. The video ended. The spotlight hit the podium. Marcus strode onto the stage to thunderous applause. "Thank you, thank you." He beamed, holding his hands up. "Friends, colleagues, family." He began with the usual platitudes, thanking the donors, praising the board, outlining the foundation's bold new vision. Elara let the words wash over her. She was tracing the patterns on the tablecloth, planning her escape. A small apartment, a quiet job, a life where she could finally paint. She would have to call her family. The thought was humiliating, but not as humiliating as this. Then his tone shifted. But change, Marcus said, his voice dropping, is not always easy. To build something new, you must first have the courage to tear down what is old. The room grew quiet. This wasn't in the prepared remarks she'd seen. For Vance Industries to reach the next level, for me to reach my full potential, I have to be willing to make hard cuts, to shed dead weight. A few people shifted uncomfortably. This was unusually aggressive even for Marcus. Elara's blood ran cold. She looked up. The spotlight was still on him, but his eyes, two dark pits of ambition, were locked directly on her. My marriage, my partnership with Elara, has been a comfort. He used the past tense. The air left her lungs. But comfort is the enemy of greatness. There were gasps. Senator Keating, sitting nearby, looked frozen, a forkful of lobster thermidor halfway to his mouth. Elara has been a wonderful part of my journey. Marcus continued, his voice dripping with false sincerity. But her journey ends here. We have amicably decided to separate. This was the first Elara was hearing of it. Amicably. And in her place, Marcus said, a triumphant smile spreading across his face, I am thrilled to announce a new partner, someone who shares my vision, my drive, and my passion for the future. He gestured to the side of the stage. Please welcome the new Senior Vice President of Vance Industries and the new chairwoman of this foundation, Ms. Chloe Sterling. Chloe glided onto the stage, bathed in a second spotlight, her red dress clinging to her like a second skin. She took Marcus's hand. He kissed her, not a peck on the cheek, but a full, passionate kiss right there on stage in front of 500 of the most powerful people in New York. The camera flashes were blinding. It was an execution. Elara sat paralyzed, the blood roaring in her ears. She was vaguely aware of a man in a black suit, one of Marcus's private security, approaching her table. Ma'am, he murmured, his voice gentle but firm. Mr. Vance has arranged a car. He wasn't asking. He was telling. But my things, she whispered, her voice trembling. Your belongings will be forwarded to an address of your choosing. The security guard said, his eyes empty. He was reading a script. She stood up. The room was spinning. Every eye was on her. Some held pity. Most held a cruel reptilian curiosity. They were witnessing a social death, and they would dine out on it for weeks. As the guard's hand touched her elbow, steering her towards the exit, Marcus's voice boomed over the microphone one last time. And now, a new beginning, to the future. The applause was deafening. The heavy ballroom doors swung shut behind her, cutting off the sound. She was in the silent, carpeted hallway, alone. The guard had already melted away. She walked one foot in front of the other through the opulent lobby. The doorman who had greeted her with a fawning Mrs. Vance just 2 hours earlier now looked straight through her. She stepped out into the cold November air. The car Marcus had arranged was a standard black Lincoln town car, not her usual Bentley driver. It was a final petty twist of the knife. As she slid into the back seat, her phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Penthouse locks have been changed. My lawyer, Mr. Adler, will contact you tomorrow with the divorce settlement. It is non-negotiable. Be smart, Elara. Don't make this messy. A second buzz. her credit card, an alert from her bank. Account frozen by primary holder. He hadn't just divorced her. He hadn't just humiliated her. He had erased her. He had left her on the street, penniless, with nothing but a $20,000 dress and a pair of borrowed diamonds. She took a deep, shuddering breath. The tears didn't come. What came instead was a coldness she hadn't felt in years, a familiar, ancestral cold. She looked at her own phone, the one he didn't pay for, the one she'd kept hidden. She opened her contacts and pressed the one named Matriarch. It rang once. "It's done," a crisp, ageless voice said. "No hello." Elara's voice was hoarse. "Grandmother, it's Elara." There was a silence on the line, a vast, snowy silence that stretched from New York to the family chateau in Geneva. "He did it," Elara whispered, the first tear finally tracking a path through her perfect makeup. "He did it all." Another pause. Then the voice of Genevieve Devereaux, the iron-willed head of the Devereaux global empire, spoke 3 words. "Give me the name." "Marcus Vance," Elara said. "Vance Industries." "I see. And the other one?" "Chloe Sterling. Her father is, I think, in logistics." "He is," Genevieve said. "And his largest contract is with our shipping division in Rotterdam." "Was." Elara closed her eyes. The machine was already turning. "Stay where you are, Elara," the matriarch commanded. "A car is coming for you, not a Lincoln. You are a Devereaux. You will not be seen in a Lincoln." The line clicked dead. Elara looked out the window. The town car was pulling up to a mid-level hotel, Marcus's final insult, a prepaid room. She told the driver to stop. She got out. She would not go in. She stood on the corner of 59th and 5th, a statue of sapphire blue. She was no longer Mrs. Vance. Within 5 minutes, a black, gleaming Rolls-Royce Phantom, the kind with diplomatic plates, purred to a stop in front of her. A driver in a full Devereaux grey livery stepped out and opened the door. "Ms. Elara," he said, as if he'd just dropped her off 5 minutes ago. "The matriarch is en route." As Elara slid into the plush, buttery leather interior she knew. Marcus hadn't just shed dead weight. He had just torpedoed his entire fragile world. And he had no idea the iceberg was now heading straight for him. The Devereaux safe house wasn't a house. It was the entire 50th floor presidential suite of the St. Regis, permanently retained under a corporate name for family use. It was quiet, opulent, and most importantly, secure. Elara spent the first 24 hours in a fog. The Devereaux team, a silent, efficient group of professionals who had materialized at the hotel, had handled everything. A woman named Sophia, who was part assistant, part security, had produced a wardrobe of perfectly tailored clothes in Elara's exact size. A lawyer, not a family one, but a specialist, had appeared, taken her statement, and vanished. Elara's prized Lockwood diamonds had been removed, catalogued, and sent to a vault to be returned to Marcus in the most insulting way possible via a bonded messenger with a receipt. She sat on a silk chaise lounge overlooking Central Park, a cup of tea she didn't remember asking for in her hand. The shock was wearing off, replaced by a deep, vibrating hum of shame and a darker, colder anger. She had been so stupid. She had fallen for the oldest trick, a charming call and a promise of normalcy. She who had been trained since birth to spot a grifter, a social climber, a liar. She had seen all those traits in Marcus, and had, in her romantic delusion, mistaken them for ambition. Her phone, the Vance phone, was a smouldering ruin. The media was having a field day. Vance's new vision, CEO dumps wife for VP at annual gala. From +1 to -1. The socialites' stunning fall. Marcus Vance and Chloe Sterling, the new power couple. The gossip columns were brutal. They painted her as a clueless, boring last-season wife who hadn't been able to keep up with her dynamic husband. Page 6 ran a particularly cruel piece, quoting an insider, clearly Chloe, who said Ilara's only hobby was finger painting. Meanwhile, Marcus and Chloe were embarking on a victory tour. They were photographed having a celebratory breakfast at Balthazar Chloe's hand, flashing a massive canary yellow diamond, a ring that must have been purchased weeks, if not months ago. Marcus had given an interview to the Wall Street Journal set up for the morning after the gala. Vance Industries is pivoting. He'd said, his picture plastered on the front page, oozing confidence. We are leaner, more aggressive. We've cut all sentimental ties. Our new flagship project, the Hudson Elysium Tower, is fully funded. We are unstoppable. Ilara let the newspaper fall to the floor. Fully funded, she whispered. She knew for a fact the Elysium Tower was a house of cards. Marcus had leveraged everything, including the penthouse, to break ground. He was desperate for a final round of financing. The door to the suite opened. He's arrogant, and arrogance is expensive. Genevieve Devereaux stood in the doorway, not as a grandmother, but as a queen. She was 75, but looked 50. Her silver hair pulled into a severe, elegant chignon. She wore a Chanel suit the color of glacial ice. Behind her stood Ilara's two brothers, men who were as much a part of the family business as she was. Liam Devereaux, the elder. He was the enforcer, the CFO of Devereaux Holdings. He saw the world in numbers, and he had the face of a particularly unforgiving auditor. Julian Devereaux, the younger. He was the diplomat, the family's chief counsel and head of public relations. He was the charming one, the one who buried the bodies with a smile. Ilara, Genevieve said, walking over and kissing the air near her cheek. You look thin, and you've let your French get rusty. Grand-mère, Ilara said, standing. Sit, Genevieve commanded, taking the chair opposite her. Liam and Julian remained standing, flanking her, like two custom-suited watchtowers. I have read the news, Genevieve said, her lip curling in distaste as she gestured to the page 6 article. Finger painting. Disgraceful. I'm sorry, Ilara whispered. I brought shame. You did not. Liam interjected, his voice a low growl. You were betrayed. There is a difference. But Liam is correct, Julian added smoothly. The optics are unseemly. A Devereaux thrown out like common trash. It will not stand. Indeed, Genevieve said. Now, Ilara, tell us, what do you want? Ilara looked at her hands. I just want to disappear. I want to go to the farmhouse to paint. No, Genevieve said. It was final. That is what she wants. She motioned to the newspaper. The boring, clueless wife. You will not give them the satisfaction. You will not run. You ran once. Look where it got you. The words were sharp, but true. This is not a social slight, Ilara. This is a declaration of war. He didn't just humiliate you. He humiliated this family. He did it publicly, so we will respond publicly. He thinks he's a king. We will remind him what a dynasty looks like. Genevieve leaned forward. This man, Marcus Vance, he is leveraged to a private equity firm in Luxembourg for the Hudson Elysium project. Correct? Ilara nodded. LuxCap Partners. He was so proud of securing it. He said they were anonymous and stupid. Liam smiled a thin, cold expression. LuxCap Partners was acquired in a hostile takeover by Devereaux Holdings at 9:00 a.m. Central European Time this morning. The anonymous and stupid money he's building his dream on. It's ours. Elara's jaw dropped. But how? You left a paper trail, Julian said. In your finger-painting studio, you kept meticulous notes on his business, his passwords, his private servers. You were the perfect invisible wife. You were also the perfect spy. Elara hadn't even realized it. She just listened. She absorbed. And Ms. Chloe Sterling. Genevieve continued tapping a pristine white envelope on the table. Her father, Sterling Logistics. As I mentioned, their largest contract was with our Rotterdam port. That contract was terminated effective immediately for breach of ethical standards. Julian has also helpfully leaked to the press that Sterling Logistics is being investigated for customs fraud. They aren't, Liam noted. They are now, Julian corrected. Reputation is everything. So, Genevieve said, standing. This is the plan. Marcus Vance believes he is at his peak. He is celebrating his new life. We will let him. For 48 hours, he will be the king of New York. He is announcing his merger with Sino-Pacific Investments on Thursday. Correct. Elara nodded. It's the final piece of his Elysium funding. A press conference at his office. Excellent, Genevieve said. That is where we will cut the head off the snake. Elara, you will go to the salon. You will go shopping. You will be seen. But you will not be seen. You are preparing. Preparing for what? Elara asked, a new strength hardening her voice. For your reintroduction, Julian said, smiling. Elara Vance is dead. We are about to reintroduce the world to Elara Devereaux. For the next 48 hours, Marcus Vance lived in a golden-tinted bubble. His life was perfect. He woke up in his penthouse, the scent of Elara's dusty lavender, and old books finally replaced by Chloe's modern, sharp perfume. Chloe herself was a revelation. She woke up at 5 a.m., reviewed Chinese market reports before her first espresso, and matched his ambition step for step. She wasn't just a partner. She was a weapon. Did you see the journal? He said, throwing the paper onto the bed. Vance, the Maverick of Manhattan. They're finally getting it. Chloe looked up from her laptop, pouting her lips. I don't like Maverick. It sounds uncontrolled. I prefer visionary. But the picture is good. She walked over and straddled his lap. The press conference on Thursday is going to be massive. Once we announce the Sino-Pacific deal, we'll be untouchable. Marcus felt a surge of pure, unadulterated power. He had done it. He had achieved everything he'd ever wanted. He'd cut the one tie that was holding him back. Elara. He felt a brief mosquito-like sting of, not guilt, but annoyance. He'd received a curt email from a law firm he'd never heard of, Hadrian and Locke, confirming they represented Elara. They'd attached a copy of the prenuptial agreement he'd forced her to sign. It was ironclad. She got nothing. Her lawyer had only one request, that her art supplies be forwarded to a P.O. box. Marcus had laughed. Finger paintings. He'd told his assistant to handle it, which meant throw them in the building's incinerator. His lawyer, Mr. Adler, had called him. Marcus just a flag, Adler had said, his voice tinny. This firm, Hadrian and Locke. They're not a divorce mill. They're significant. Their managing partner is on the Federal Reserve Board. So, Marcus had scoffed. She's probably got some bleeding heart pro bono case. She signed the papers Adler. It's done. As you say, Marcus. And the financials for the Sino-Pacific closing. Airtight, Marcus said. LuxCap wired the last tranche yesterday. The money is in escrow. The Hudson Elysium Tower is a go. His world was perfect. But there were small tremors. His assistant buzzed him. Mr. Vance. A slight issue. Sterling Logistics just declared force majeure. They're pulling their entire fleet. What? Marcus barked. They can't do that. They're Chloe's family. He'd stormed into Chloe's new cavernous office. What the hell is going on with your father? Chloe looked pale, her usual composure cracked. He said they're being investigated. Some ridiculous customs fraud charge. He said a contract was pulled, a big one. He's furious. He told me I should have stayed in my lane. Useless, Marcus muttered. Fine, we'll get another logistics company. Call O'Malley. O'Malley just terminated their contract with us, his assistant said over the intercom, her voice quavering. And so did Eastern Trucking and Global Link. What is this? Marcus roared. Is this a joke? They all cite financial risk reviews, the assistant whispered. A cold dread, the first he'd felt in days, began to creep up his spine. It doesn't matter, he said more to himself than to Chloe. It's all noise. The Sino-Pacific deal is all that matters. The money is in. The deal is closing. Thursday. Nothing can stop that. He was Marcus Vance. He was a maverick. He was a visionary. He was unstoppable. He spent the rest of the day in a flurry of angry calls, all of which went to voicemail. Suppliers he'd had lunch with last week were suddenly in a meeting. Bankers who had begged for his business were on vacation. It was a coincidence, a statistical blip. He went home craving the reassurance of his perfect penthouse. When he walked in, he found Chloe frantically packing a suitcase. What are you doing? He demanded. My father called, she said, her voice high and thin. The feds just raided his office. They're freezing our assets. His assets. He said this is a professional hit. He said, I'm radioactive. I have to go. Go where we have the press conference tomorrow. You don't get it, do you? She shrieked, her mask of sophistication shattering. This isn't about you. My family is being ruined. I thought you were a king, Marcus. But this is a war, and you're on the wrong side. What are you talking about? What war I won? Did you? She said, zipping the bag. This all started the day after that stupid gala. The day after you humiliated your little mouse of a wife. You poked something, Marcus. You poked something you shouldn't have. Get out, he hissed, his voice dropping. Gladly, she spat, grabbing her passport. And for the record, your Elysium Tower is a glass monstrosity, and I hate canary diamonds. She slammed the door. Marcus stood alone in the marble foyer, the silence of the penthouse deafening. The fear was no longer a creep. It was a flood. He ran to his office and pulled up the accounts for the LuxCap Partners financing. The money was still there in the escrow account, safe. He breathed. It was fine. Chloe was a liability anyway. Her family was a mess. He was better off. He'd announce the deal tomorrow solo. He was a lone wolf, a visionary. He poured himself a 30-year-old Macallan. His hand shaking just slightly. It was all a coincidence. It had to be. Thursday, 11:00 a.m. The main conference hall at Vance Industries headquarters was packed. The Sino-Pacific deal was huge. It wasn't just a merger. It was a symbolic marriage of New York real estate and Asian capital. The Wall Street Journal, Bloomberg, the Financial Times, every major outlet was there. Marcus Vance stood backstage adjusting his power blue tie. He hadn't slept. The departure of Chloe, followed by a sleepless night of his suppliers' lines going dead, had left him rattled. But the adrenaline of the crowd, the flashing cameras, the knowledge that he was this close to pulling it off, steadied him. This was it. The moment he became a legend. "Ladies and gentlemen," his PR director announced from the podium, "the CEO of Vance Industries, Mr. Marcus Vance." Marcus strode onto the stage, forcing his most confident, shark-like smile. The applause was strong. "Thank you," he began, his voice booming. "Thank you for coming. What a day for New York. What a day for the future." He launched into his speech. He talked about vision. He talked about steel and glass and the skyline. He talked about the transformative partnership with Sino-Pacific. And now, at this very moment, he said, building to his crescendo, the $4 billion wire transfer that finalizes our joint venture is being released. The Hudson Elysium Tower is no longer a dream. It is a reality. He expected thunderous applause. Instead, there was a commotion at the back of the room. The heavy oak doors of the conference hall swung open. A few journalists turned, annoyed by the interruption. Then they fell silent. The silence spread like a virus. First, two very large, very well-dressed men, who looked like they could snap a person in half and then file a legal brief about it, entered and stood at ease, scanning the room. Then Julian Devereaux entered. He was smiling, radiating charm, and wearing a Savile Row suit that probably cost more than the podium Marcus was gripping. He was followed by Liam Devereaux, who was not smiling. Liam held a leather-bound portfolio, and he looked at the room at Marcus as if he were calculating its liquidation value. Then a hush fell as Genevieve Devereaux entered. She commanded the space not by speaking, but by breathing. The scent of her perfume, a rare custom blend Guerlain, preceded her. She stopped, surveyed the room, and her gaze, cold and assessing, settled on Marcus. Marcus had gone completely deathly still. His mind was racing. Devereaux. The Devereaux, the Swiss-French banking and logistics dynasty. The family that owned half of Europe and had been old money when the Rockefellers were still drilling. What were they doing here? He'd been trying to get a meeting with Devereaux Holdings for years. "Ms. Devereaux." Marcus stammered, his prepared speech forgotten. He fumbled off the stage, rushing toward her, his hand outstretched, his plastic smile snapping back into place. What an unexpected honor. I had no idea you were in New York. Had I known, I would have... Well, this is incredible." Genevieve looked at his outstretched hand as if it were a dead fish. She did not take it. "Mr. Vance," she said. Her voice was quiet, but it carried across the silent room like a shard of ice. "Please," he gushed. "My staff can find you a seat. We're just announcing it's a new era." "We are not here for a seat," Julian said, stepping forward smoothly. "We are here for a clarification." "A clarification." Marcus laughed nervously. "About what?" "The deal. It's all public." "No," Genevieve said. "Not about your deal. About a personal matter." The journalists were now out of their seats, cameras flashing recorders on. This was 1,000 times better than a boring merger. I don't understand," Marcus said. The dread was back thick and suffocating. "You see," Genevieve said, "this family takes its name very seriously, Mr. Vance, and you have, misused it." "Misused your name? I would never," he sputtered. "I have the utmost respect for—" "And yet," Genevieve continued, "you put a member of this family, the daughter of this house, you put her in a taxi, in the middle of the night, with her credit cards cancelled." The room inhaled as one. Marcus's brain short-circuited. "Daughter. Daughter. What daughter?" "You had her escorted from a public event, like a common criminal," Genevieve said, her voice rising almost imperceptibly, but to devastating effect. I don't know what you're talking about," Marcus stammered, his face losing all color. "Don't you—" And then Genevieve Devereux stepped to the side. She had been obscuring the doorway. Now she revealed the person standing just behind her. Elara. But this was not the Elara he knew. This was not the quiet, mousy woman in the ill-fitting quaint pearls. This was Elara Devereux. Her hair, once a simple brown, was now a rich, dark auburn, styled in a cut so sharp it could draw blood. She wore a tailored suit of crimson red, a color of war, that fit her like armor. Her grandmother's pearls were gone, replaced by a single massive Devereux family crest, a diamond and ruby lion. Her makeup was flawless. Her posture was steel. She looked at Marcus, not with pain or sadness or anger. She looked at him with pity. Marcus's blood turned to ice water. His smile froze, then collapsed. He turned a color of ash, a sickly pale green. He looked at the woman in red. He looked at the matriarch. He looked at the family crest. And he connected the dots. Elara. Elara Hayes. Her mother's family. Her quaint pearls. Her. Elara, he whispered. His voice was a dry croak. Elara stepped forward. The cameras swarmed a frenzy of clicking shutters. "Hello, Marcus," she said, her voice clear and strong. "You wanted to introduce your new partner. I thought it was only fair that I introduce my old one." She gestured to her grandmother. The Page 6 reporter, the one who had written the finger-painting article, shouted first. "Miss Vance, who are these people?" Elara smiled. "These are my people, and you've been mispronouncing my name. It's not Vance. It's Devereux. Elara Devereux." A collective bomb went off in the room. Marcus literally staggered back, his hand grabbing the podium to steady himself. He was hyperventilating. He had just publicly, grotesque, and catastrophically humiliated the sole heiress of the Devereux dynasty. He wasn't just a king on a cardboard throne. He was a dead man. The world did not end for Marcus Vance in a fiery explosion. It ended in a series of quiet, precise, devastatingly legal clicks. As Elara's words, "It's Devereux," hung in the air, Liam the Enforcer finally stepped forward. He placed his leather portfolio on the podium that Marcus was still clinging to. "Mr. Vance," Liam said, his voice as unfeeling as a stock ticker, "let's talk about your reality, the Hudson Elysium Tower." Marcus just stared, his mouth opening and closing. "As of 9:00 a.m. this morning," Liam continued, addressing the room, "Devereux Holdings, the parent company of Lux Cap Partners, has called the note on the $2.8 billion bridge loan funding this project." A reporter from Bloomberg gasped. "You're Lux Cap." "We are," Liam said. "Mr. Vance was delinquent, On several covenants. No, Marcus choked. The payments, they're not due. The money is in escrow. Read the fine print, Julian added, pointing to a highlighted clause in a document he'd pulled from the portfolio. Clause 22A, the Material Adverse Change Clause. We find that the CEO and primary guarantor of the loan, Mr. Vance, has engaged in behavior that constitutes catastrophic reputational risk, specifically the public and fraudulent termination of his contract, he nodded at Elara, with a primary member of our holding. This is illegal, Marcus shouted, his voice cracking into a panicked shriek. On the contrary, Julian said, it's beautifully, perfectly legal. Mr. Adler, your own lawyer, approved the language. He's a very thorough man. A new horror dawned on Marcus. Adler works for you. But Adler, Genevieve said with a dismissive wave, is a sensible man. He knows which way the wind blows. He will be testifying in the fraud investigation. Fraud. The overvaluing of your assets to secure the LuxCap loan in the first place, Liam said, bored. Inflating your occupancy rates, claiming commercial tenants that don't exist. We found the real books. Elara, it seems, knew where all the bodies were buried. Marcus turned to Elara, his eyes wild with betrayal. You spy in my own home. You called it clutter. Marcus, Elara said, her voice even. I called it a contingency plan. You taught me to always read the fine print. The journalists were in a shark-feeding frenzy. Mr. Vance, is it true you defrauded your lenders? Elara. How long were you planning this, Ms. Devereaux? What does this mean for the merger? Ah, yes. Julian said the Sino-Pacific deal, the $4 billion transfer. He pointed to the large screen behind the podium, where the deal complete graphic was supposed to appear. The deal, Julian announced, was contingent on the LuxCap funding being secure. As it is no longer secure, Sino-Pacific has, as of 2 minutes ago, withdrawn from all negotiations. On the screen, a new message flashed courtesy of Julian's technician. Deal terminated. Sino-Pacific Investments. No. Marcus was physically melting down. He tore at his tie, his face slick with a terrified sweat. But it's not just the tower. Liam continued, his voice a monotone of destruction. It's everything. He ticked the points off on his fingers. The bank holding the mortgage on this very building Devereaux owned. You are in default. We are evicting. The suppliers who all cancelled yesterday. They share a parent company. Ours. Senator Keating, your man in Washington. He is currently in a meeting with the Senate Ethics Committee discussing the undisclosed gifts he received from you. He has, we're told, a sudden and profound desire to come clean. And finally, Genevieve said, stepping forward for the final blow. Vance Industries, a company built on air and arrogance. As your primary and, as of now, only creditor, we will be petitioning for involuntary bankruptcy. We will be seizing all assets to cover the outstanding debt. She paused, looking at the shell of the man before her. My family will take the penthouse, of course. We find the view appealing. Liam's team will be there at 3:00 p.m. to change the locks. Please have your personal effects removed by then. It was a perfect, devastating echo of the humiliation he had inflicted on Elara. Marcus Vance stared, his world dissolved. He had gone from a billionaire visionary to a bankrupt fraud in less than 10 minutes. He looked at the crowd, at the cameras, at the Devereaux family, standing united and powerful. And finally, his eyes landed on Elara. She was not smiling. She was not triumphant. She just looked Finished. His knees no longer able to support the weight of his ruined ambitions buckled. Marcus Vance, the maverick of Manhattan, collapsed onto the stage, a pathetic, sobbing heap, as the cameras flashed, capturing the single greatest social and financial immolation in New York history. While Marcus was being publicly disassembled, Chloe Sterling was sitting in the first-class lounge at JFK, sipping a mimosa and frantically trying to move assets to an offshore account. She had seen the news alerts. Sterling Logistics raided by feds. Her father had called her screaming before being cut off. She was on her own. It's fine, she told herself, her leg bouncing under the table. Marcus is a fool, but he's a rich fool. The Sino-Pacific deal will close. He'll be furious with me, but he needs me. I'll fly to a non-extradition country, wait for this to blow over, and then I'll call him. He'll take me back. I'm the only one who understands him. Her flight to the Cayman Islands was boarding in 30 minutes. She was just a little radioactive. She just needed a break from the contamination zone. Miss Chloe Sterling. Two men in dark conservative suits and TSA badges stood over her table. Yes, she said, annoyed. We're with the U.S. Marshals Service. We need you to come with us. There are some irregularities with your passport. Irregularities? Chloe laughed, a high, nervous sound. It's brand new. I'm a first-class passenger. Now, ma'am, the first marshal said, his voice flat. He wasn't playing. A cold fear, the same one Marcus had felt, gripped her. I'm not going anywhere. I want my lawyer. You'll have plenty of time for that, the second marshal said. You're being detained. Detained for what I haven't done anything. Insider trading, the first marshal said, picking up her carry-on bag. It seems you made a series of very well-timed stock trades against competitors of Sterling Logistics, trades that were apparently based on information you gleaned from, where was it, Frank? Classified shipping manifests, ma'am, Frank said, from a company called Devereaux Holdings. They filed the complaint this morning. They take corporate espionage very seriously. Chloe's face went white. Devereaux. The name was everywhere. That's not possible. That's my father's business. Not anymore, Frank said, pulling out a pair of handcuffs. Please stand up, Ms. Sterling, and please try not to make this a scene. This lounge is for real first-class passengers. The karma was brutal, swift, and entirely public. As Chloe Sterling was led out of the first-class lounge in handcuffs, her face a mask of shocked fury, she passed a television screen. The news was no longer about her father. It was a live feed from the Vance Industries press conference. The shot was a close-up of Marcus Vance, on his knees, sobbing. And standing over him, looking like a queen in a suit of blood-red armor, was Elara, the quiet, mousy, finger-painting wife. Chloe finally understood. She hadn't been replaced by Elara. She had been the tool Elara's family used to detonate Marcus's life. She was collateral damage. She wasn't the new power player. She was, as Marcus had so cruelly put it, just dead weight. The last sound she made before the lounge doors closed was a howl of pure, unadulterated rage. 6 months later, the name Marcus Vance was a punchline in New York. He had lost everything. The penthouse, the company, the friends. He was a pariah, buried in lawsuits from every contractor, investor, and employee he had ever stiffed. The fraud investigation had turned into an indictment. He was last seen balding and bloated, getting into a taxi outside his lawyer's office, shouting at a reporter that he was a visionary. The Hudson Elysium Tower, his glass and steel monument, sat half-finished, a rusted skeleton on the skyline. The Devereux family had bought it out of bankruptcy for 10 cents on the dollar, and Genevieve had publicly announced it was being reimagined. The Page 6 reporter who had mocked Elara was now writing glowing, fawning pieces about the Devereux family's quiet, powerful philanthropy. But the real story wasn't in New York. It was in Florence, Italy. The Uffizi Gallery was hosting a gala. But this was not a gala of social climbers and insecure CEOs. This was a gathering of academics, artists, and patrons. They were celebrating the unveiling of a newly restored Botticelli, a masterpiece that had been languishing in a back room damaged by a flood decades ago. The project had been funded by a new powerful initiative, the Elara Devereux Foundation. Its mission was simple: to find the art, the beauty and the history that the world had dismissed as clutter, and to restore it. Elara Devereux stood at the podium. She was not wearing red armor tonight. She wore an elegant, simple forest green dress. Her grandmother's pearls were fastened at her throat. She was radiant. "When we find something or someone that has been neglected," she said, her voice clear and warm, resonating in the ancient hall, "we have two choices. We can see them as dead weight, as a quaint relic of the past, to be discarded." She paused, and the room full of people who knew her story held its breath. "Or," she continued, "we can see the masterpiece beneath the dust. We can see the strength that survived. We can choose to restore, to rebuild, to reveal the truth. My foundation is built on the belief that nothing and no one is ever truly broken beyond repair." The applause was genuine, and for Elara truly healing. After the speech, she walked through the gallery, accepting congratulations. Her brothers Liam and Julian were there, beaming with a pride that was real. Her grandmother Genevieve watched from a distance, a rare, soft smile on her face. A man approached Elara, a shy-looking man with kind eyes and paint smudges on his tuxedo jacket. He was Matteo, the Uffizi's chief restorer. "Signora Devereux," he said in accented English, "what you have done, it is a miracle." "No miracle, Matteo," Elara smiled. "Just patience, and the right tools, and a vision," he said, "to see what was always there." He kissed her hand. "Your speech was perfetto. Will you join me for a glass of champagne? I want to show you the sketches for the next project." "I would love that," Elara said. As she walked away with Matteo, laughing at something he said, she felt the last cold fragment of Elara Vance fall away. She was not a victim. She was not a wife. She was not even entirely just a Devereux. She was Elara, a restorer, a builder. She had taken the shattered pieces of her own life, and with the help of her dynasty, had built an empire of her own, one not of steel and glass, but of beauty, strength, and hard-earned truth. And that was the most powerful foundation of all. And that, as they say, is karma. Marcus thought he was the shark, but he was just a guppy in an ocean owned by a whale. Elara's story shows us that true power isn't about how loud you shout, but about the strength you hold in silence. It's a reminder to never, ever underestimate the quiet person in the room. What did you think of Marcus's epic downfall? Was Genevieve Devereux the most savage matriarch ever? Or did Marcus get exactly what he deserved? Let me know your favorite part of this story in the comments below. If you loved this story of drama and ultimate revenge, please hit that like button. Share this video with someone who needs to see karma served. And of course, subscribe to the channel for more real-life stories like this one every single week. You won't want to miss what's coming next.